Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Organics Show. Today is episode 35. We're flying through the year and we've got plenty more to come this year. There's some big guests lined up for the rest of the year. I'm very excited. I've decided actually to do about 50 episodes per year. So it rounds out the nice 50 number each year. And what I'll do on episode 50 is I'm going to bring out a bit of a special that's going to highlight some of the fabulous conversations that we've had during the year and maybe put them together as a little bit of a compilation of the best bits of the year. So that's episode 50, but we've got a few to go before then, and this one is a special one not to be forgotten about. Today we have Kate Wall joining us, and Kate is a gardening coach. She's also a Brisbane local as well. And I've had the pleasure of having quite a few people recommend Kate to come on the show this year because she has so much knowledge that can help us in our gardens and in our spaces. And what's really cool about Kate's knowledge is it comes from a few different backgrounds and a science background and very much an experiential, I guess, background of being through such experiences that you'll hear about in the conversation and how that's shaped her view of gardening and how she could come and help us see gardening in a different light. Now, during this conversation, Kate shared so many things with me that I learned and was new to me today. And even though I had an understanding of some of these things, she's helped me see it in a different light, and I'm so grateful to her for that. And I'm absolutely sure that you're going to be able to get some of that out of today's episode as well. So let's do it. Let's jump straight in. I've got the conversation here with Kate Wall, the gardening coach. But let's go back to the flooding event of 2011 and working with the community or working in so many different situations to bring things back after a disaster. Can you talk to me about what you were seeing in those initial,
Oh, goodness.
consultations, what it was like, and just a little bit of
Jordan, it was
foundation?
dramatic. It was overwhelming.
I
It
bet.
was gut-wrenching. It was a very raw experience. So to give you a little bit of background, I was working at the time in the water industry because my formal qualifications are actually in environmental biology. So
Right.
I'd been working in the water industry in the lead up to that, which gave me a very different focus because I knew a lot about contamination.
Mm.
So coming into the flooding and the work that I was doing, I was working in water efficiency management plans, dried up overnight when it started raining. And there I was with a toddler watching my neighborhood go underwater. So our house was okay. I had small amounts of flooding in the garden, which was dramatic in itself, but at least my home was fine.
Hmm.
The There was a house on the corner of my street that had the most beautiful garden. Every day I would go past and think, what a lovely garden.
Mm.
But that went under to the ceiling.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
very badly flooded. The
Oh
elderly
my.
couple never came back. And I knew as I watched over the coming days, as the water receded and you're left with the debris and the mud and the mess, that if someone could get in and clean it up, I knew how to save the garden. But I also knew you cannot go in without permission. It's
Yeah.
just not fair. The whole experience has been traumatic enough. So I went to the local flood support network that had developed at our local school. And this was in the very, very early days. This was a community that really came together like had
Mm.
never previously happened in Australia.
Yeah.
So and there I met with another lady who had a mowing business. The two of us teamed up and said, let's go and fix some gardens.
That's so amazing.
We connected in straight away, and before we knew it, we had people just coming to us from all direction. We had the Lions sending people to us. We had the
Wow.
community sending people to us. We built some volunteers, and we just went from garden to garden to garden, helping in whatever way we could. Some of that was just advice. Some of it was getting in and doing a whole lot of hard work. Some of it was sourcing something as simple as some wood chip mulch
hmm
to restore the life in the soil and to slow down that drying out. You've got to
hmm
deal with that mud. So there were a lot of different things, but every single time we found that you start with people crying on your shoulders, couple
hmm
of hours of gardening together, and you've lifted their spirits.
Yeah,
We
100%.
started seeing people who were in absolute despair about ever going back to their homes. But
Mm.
you go in and you mow the overgrown lawn, and suddenly it doesn't look as overwhelming. You cover the mud with wood chip, put in a couple of new plants, and they see life coming back. And
Yeah.
these may seem like small, simple things, but it takes a big part of the overwhelm out of their picture. So while we couldn't help them with their house, we could help them just in that keep putting another foot in front of the other. And it ended up
Wow.
making an insane difference. It was really unbelievable. There were a lot of tears over the months we were doing that on their part and ours.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a beautiful thing that you did, and just a beautiful example of community, as you say, just coming together in those times. And it obviously has really affected you in a deep way, and then you're able to then take that and run with it and help other people. So how do you there's a few different directions I'd love to go after that because it's so
It
wonderful.
kind of leaves in more questions than answers, doesn't it?
A little bit, yes. Um, I want to talk. Let's just talk about your journey personally first, and then we'll come back to more of the gardening focus and what you might do practically in some of these situations. Um, so for yourself, then, how or why do you think that experience led you into where you are today?
Well, first and foremost, it was after doing 6 months of full-time volunteer work with a toddler in tow, it was, and just going running from garden to garden, giving advice, fixing things. Suddenly it was, I really need to earn some money. I need to go back to get a real job. The second I walked back into an office, I knew that I couldn't do it,
hmm
that was it. I was done with, any sort of corporate office work. I had to be outdoors in the garden.
Yeah.
And that led me to just walk out and say, no, I'm gardening.
Good on you.
And so that was where it all started. And I guess it had given me that trial by fire, that I'd
Yes.
been put on the spot so many times to find a solution that I knew exactly what I was doing.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's hard to make that leap out of something. I
No, it
mean,
was so easy. It was
okay,
meant to be. It was, for me, it just felt like the most natural thing to do. I know what you mean. It should be hard, but actually, it kind of felt like I landed where I needed to go.
I like that because you're right. It shouldn't be hard if it's the right decision.
Yep,
And
exactly.
yeah, I think also though people do, as we say, struggle with that type of thing to just really back themselves to go and make that leap out of a bit of security to something that's
But
like
I'd
something
had
new.
6 months of volunteering and doing exactly that.
Yes.
So
Okay.
even though I hadn't been asking for payment because we were focused entirely on flood recovery as volunteers,
Yeah.
I knew I could do the work involved.
Yeah, wonderful. That's so cool. So then that's led you to then sharing a lot of your knowledge from obviously various different backgrounds now, the like ecology and the, learning from flood disaster relief, all of this, your own gardening, and experiences through that. So now you're running so many different things like workshops, you're attending different talks, you're doing various different things. Can you give me a little bit of an outline as what life looks like for you now?
Chaotic?
Yeah.
No 2 days are the same, but I
Wow.
love it like that. It's
Yeah.
so yes, there will be talks that I'm doing, and it's when friends try and catch up with me, they're just like, "Are you working this weekend?" Yes, of course I'm working this weekend. No,
Yeah.
I'm not catching up on Friday night. I've got an early morning. It's so there, or I'll be doing an evening talk somewhere. There's something happening at all different times of the day, but I've been lucky. I've been able to structure my life in such a way that I can make it work. So there'll
hmm
be times that I spend just quietly, me and the dogs and the laptop
Yeah.
writing.
Yes.
And there's other times that I'm out there busy presenting. There's times that I'm working with people in their gardens, doing the garden coaching and getting hands
Hmm.
on with them, teaching them what to do. So it's a real mix of all sorts of different things.
And that variety keeps it nice and interesting and keeps you on your toes and gives you lots of new shared experiences with different people, doesn't it?
Every time I think, oh my goodness, I am so tired of doing the same thing all the time, I realize I'm not doing the same thing all the time. What on earth are you talking about?
Hmm.
I'll walk into another garden that's completely different, another person that's struggling, and you can solve some of their problems and you make it easy for them. I think that's really important
Mm.
that you bring them back to gardening. And as soon as I see that, my heart is full again and I love what I do.
Exactly. It makes it so worthwhile when you can just see you've lifted a little bit off their shoulders and
Yeah.
given them that kind of the hope or a little bit of a spark of
Although I
inspiration.
must admit, I did have a client last week that I felt the exact opposite. I think I'd put more onto her shoulders. She had a new build where the developers had done so many awful things in the
Oh no.
garden. This poor woman thought she'd bought this place with a beautiful garden, and to point out how everything was within weeks or months of being completely dead.
Oh
We
no.
need to get in and make some changes quickly.
Mm.
It's overwhelming and it's horrible to give people that information, but at the same time, it's better to give it to them with a solution than wait till it's already dead.
Exactly. Yeah, because then you're kind of coming to them and saying, "Look, I know I'm giving you some bad news here, but look, I've already thought about the alternative. I'm not passing on the problem to you. I've got the solution there ready for you." Do you find a lot of problem solving in these types of situations comes naturally to you? Do you like enjoy that type of thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
That,
I don't even think that I'm problem solving. I step into a garden and I start with asking the client, what do you want the garden to be? If you
Mhm.
could have anything that you want, what do you want the garden to be? And then we just delve into, well, what have we got to change? How are we going to restructure things? Or tweak what's already there. So the problem solving is just a part of the journey. It doesn't feel like problem solving.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool too. And I like the part about, so this comes back to what we were talking about before with the flooding, or I guess practical techniques that we could use to reinvigorate gardens or deal with certain problems, whether it be contamination or just complete wash away of topsoil or the mud that's come through. I don't think people realize the amount of mud that a flood leaves
Look, if you
behind.
have never experienced that flood mud, and I have these conversations often with people all over the world, if you've never experienced flood mud, you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say it sets like concrete.
Yeah.
It is insane. But, for us in Australia, the floods that we've dealt with, we've got varying degrees of mud,
Hmm.
which can still be deep enough to be significantly problematic. But a few years ago, I had people contacting me from New Zealand who had more than a meter of mud dumped in
Wow.
their garden by a flood.
Whoa.
It's so, we've got a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah, it's certainly true, but yeah, I just don't think people understand it. But there's a few different issues that come with these types of things, and whether these situations happen in nature naturally or not. Well, what I'm getting at is if we observe what happens in nature, we can often see clues as to how nature likes to bounce back from these types of things and what certain situations happen. So if there's a complete desolation of topsoil and the mud sets in and this type of thing, we're often going to see a certain type of pioneer
We
species
won't
coming back.
see it in nature. And I think this is a key part of
Right,
my approach to restoring a garden after a flood.
right.
Because after you've had a completely natural flood under completely natural situations, which I might add don't exist anywhere in the world anymore. So,
Right.
we're talking hypothetical now.
Yeah.
But, when these floods happened, and they did happen before white colonization, at that stage, you've got enough cover over the land that you don't get that much silt in the first place.
Hmm.
You do still get silt, but you already have enough vegetation cover that you are not getting the extreme levels of silt. You're not getting the extreme damage that does.
Right. That
What
makes a
we
lot of
do
sense.
see, though, is we do see a lot of this happen these days in some of the third world countries where a lot of those floodplains are your classic farming zones. And so a lot of people say, but surely if it floods, it means it's highly fertile. Yes and no. It
Mm,
depends on what's coming in with that. And yes, flooding does build up natural, wonderful, fertile soil. But what you see in those situations is those farmers, and they are all third world kind of farmers. We're not talking about machinery.
hmm
They're in on foot,
hmm
replanting, making something happen immediately. That
Yeah.
mud is not left to dry out. And more importantly, it's not being driven over by excavators trying to fix the house.
hmm
So, what's going on in our gardens is a very unnatural situation. If we look
Mm.
to nature, we're seeing something completely different. We have to
Yeah.
work in new nature,
Yeah.
and that is, a very human-centric environment.
Yeah, well, we're certainly having our impact on it, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because well, I hadn't thought of it like that, and I really appreciate you sharing that because you're right. If it is natural, then usually there's a lot of other factors that are working within that to help balance it out and create that symbiosis, right? So
Absolutely.
in
Yep.
this situation, when we're throwing it out of whack, we are getting an unnatural amount of this silt and this mud and all of this. So what's your first port of call, I guess, with all of this mud? If you've got all this mud come into your garden
Cover it.
in extreme
Cover it.
levels,
Mulch over it.
yes,
Mulch over it with
organic matter.
anything you can get your hands on.
Hmm
You've got to cover it. Now, yes, organic matter is important because we need the organic matter back in the soil to build structure back into that soil because we've now got very fine silt.
hmm
And, too much silt is as problematic as too much clay or too much sand.
hmm
So we do have to add the organic matter, but in the very first instance, the day you get back to your house after a flood, you need to cover that mud with anything you can find,
mm
whether that's cardboard boxes, whether you've ripped the carpet out because the carpet's ruined, anything, lay it over. If it's a carpet, don't leave it there, but use it at least temporarily
hmm
to slow down how fast that mud dries out.
Right.
The faster it dries out, the more it's going to shrink and the harder it's going to be.
And then presumably no more water penetration through that, or it's just going to have,
Oh, you
things
you have
running
to
off it
allow
and
for the
roots.
the constant water penetration. It's that we never want to stop water penetration,
But
but
does that happen with the hardening of the silt and all of that mud? Does that
yeah, because
then,
what would happen is you form a crust,
mm,
and that crust stops ongoing water penetration
and
and
then
causes
obviously
additional
roots?
erosion. It's yeah, there's all sorts of problems when you get that crust,
hmm
and that's what we're trying to avoid by mulching over it. But the
Okay.
absolute best thing you can do is cover it, mulch it with wood chip.
Yeah.
If you
hmm
possibly can, get a load of wood chip and mulch it with that.
Yeah, okay. And that helps because there's a certain amount of I guess like carbon content and things like this, or is
The
it?
carbon content's critical. You need that organic matter, but you need that to be forming that humus layer with the soil.
Yeah, yeah.
So you need that contact between the mulch and the soil, and that's that zone where everything starts to happen.
hmm
Then, as that moves down into the soil, not only is it buffering from the surface, we're starting to bring life back into the soil.
Yeah, cool. I really like that. Well, great. And then if obviously if people are not able to do this, then you're facing maybe trying to turn over some of this or break it up a little
No,
bit.
no, 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 no.
No, you're not. Cool.
No,
Great.
do
Well,
not dig
that's
it.
good. That's
Do
good.
not dig it. I mean, the first thing that's going to happen if you try and dig it is you're going to hurt your back.
Well, yeah.
It's way too hard. Even
Okay.
if it hasn't set like concrete, the weight in that soil now is
Mm.
astronomical.
hmm
So no, we don't want to dig it.
Okay,
You
cool.
really, even if you do nothing, wait until you get the chance to
Cover it.
add your carbon, your organic matter on top, hopefully wood chip mulch. But if you have let it dry out and you have got it that bad, that's when I would be looking at adding as well something like some rock minerals
Yeah,
so that you're
okay.
helping to change that structure a bit more
hmm
rapidly and you're bringing in the microbes. So you're bringing in extra life, assuming you're using rock minerals that have microbes with them.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, cool. And then that leaves that whole soil system intact still, and we're not trying to turn over it and dry it all out and lose
No,
more life.
no, that's exactly right. We still want nature to be
Yeah.
working in a soil profile.
Okay. I really like that. Brilliant. One thing I was going to mention before is that if you sort of, I guess, left an area like this, eventually nature would start filling it up with
Of course.
pioneer species, right?
Yes, absolutely. And they would be what we consider weeds.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good, nice little segue into weeds. Do you want to just share with us a little bit of how your perspective is of these plants and what are
How long have
people?
we
Yeah.
got?
Well,
Look, I love weeds. I
Mhm.
was just out for a walk now and walking through a section. Um, I dropped my car off to be serviced. And so as I walked home, I'm walking through a fairly industrial area and then through a couple of parks. And I thought, I'm just going to have a count of how many things are in flower. You know,
Mhm.
flowers are obviously critical for pollinators, and this is a whole other section of nature that we've got to start looking at in a
Yes.
lot more detail. So I thought, as I'm walking, I'm just going to have a look at what's in flower around me because I keep talking about the fact that not enough people grow flowers. But let's actually put some numbers to it. So as I walked, I counted 19 different weeds in flower before I found anything that was not a
Wow.
declared weed.
Wow.
And that's really telling you a lot about where the biodiversity is coming from,
Mhm.
where the pollinators are getting food from in our suburban environment. It's there was one park that hadn't been mown. It was lush and green. There was nothing, particularly tall and scary about it. It didn't
Yeah.
make you feel uncomfortable to walk in, but it was so teeming with life.
Yeah.
And then the next park that I walked through, council have been mowing, they've been spraying the weeds, and we had a biological desert instead. And a perfect situation for fire ants. There's so much that we're not looking at when we don't talk about the whole picture. And that I think upsets me the most about weeds.
Mhm.
And this is something that sticks in my gut a little bit. I know that my point of view is somewhat controversial, but it is entirely backed by science.
Yeah.
Is that weeds are colonizers. They
Mhm.
have a role to play in nature. That's why they're there.
Mhm.
Nature has put them there. Yes, we as humans have played a role in spreading these things around the world, but they have a really important role. We have also played a dramatic role in causing the degradation that
Mhm.
requires colonizers to fix.
Mhm.
So, what we are actually doing is we're doing the harm and then we're adding to that harm by taking away nature's attempt to fix the harm.
Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it. I back you 100%. I don't think it's controversial at all. I
I'm
think
so glad to hear that.
I don't think it's controversial at all. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. I believe that nature has the perfect blueprint and that every single thing that we see is an attempt to fix something, balance something, or something that's working
With
together as
with
part of a system.
Yes, but I will add to that though that we have this notion of nature in balance,
Hmm.
and yet in reality there's no such thing because nature doesn't have an end point.
Hmm.
It's on a continual pathway of evolution.
Yes.
We go through periods where things are stable and you don't see a lot of evolution, you don't see a lot of speciation. Then you have more turbulent times.
Yeah.
And that has always happened.
True.
This is where, at the moment, what we've got to be very careful of is as we're seeing climate change, and we are seeing changes in gardens as well as changes in wild systems, we have to allow nature to adapt and change with it. We
Hmm.
can't be focused on this is what grew here 200 years ago, this is what has to grow here now, because it's not the same place as it was 200 years ago. It's not the same climate and it's
Hmm.
not the same soil. There's
Yes.
so much that's changed. We have to allow some adaptation. A snapshot in time is not how nature works.
That's a
We've
very
got
good
to
point.
allow some evolution.
Yes, and the constant evolving and constant movement is because of the adaptation based on something that's on the further end of the scale, right? Something a little bit unnatural or an explosion of a population of something or
It can
a
be what it is
disaster or
often driven by is a push towards biodiversity.
hmm.
So nature will work towards increasing biodiversity.
Hmm.
And this is what that example in the park showed that where it wasn't mown, and these weeds were just allowed to be in amongst the grass, there was a fabulous abundance.
Mm.
When I went to the park that was mown, there was no diversity at all. And it lacks that abundance. This is what nature does. It brings in some diversity. Wherever you see a monoculture, it's not a natural system, and nature wants to get in and change it.
Hmm.
Now, we do see certain plants, and people will immediately say, what about lantana? It's yes, that is a monoculture, but it is still an active repair.
Hmm.
If you ever pulled out lantana and looked at the soil underneath, it's incredible how lantana works to build soil. And there's a
Wow.
handful of these weeds that, if left alone, they build soil.
Hmm.
Over time, this is causing repair. And then as things start changing and they start getting eaten, a fire may come through and damage the lantana. That allows space for other things to start growing.
Yeah.
It's not an end point. We mustn't see it as an end point. What we've got to do is see what we had before that weed took over, and what we had was a problem.
Yeah.
The weed may not be the solution we want, but it's nature's way of bringing a solution in. And if we don't want the weed as the solution, we need to step in and do the job the weed is doing. So
Yes.
if we ever attack weeds and say, this weed is bad, I don't want it, I'm going to kill it, whether we use poison or any other method, if we are fighting weeds by just taking them out without thinking about the job they're doing, we're never going to win. We haven't changed the conditions that resulted in that weed being there in the first place.
That's so true. And I love that because that's exactly what I've been saying to people with who are struggling with weeds and certain different types of things. I said, but tell me what you think about this. I like the notion that weeds are a signpost for what the soil is lacking, or needing, or the environment might be needing, for example. So it's a bit of a signpost to that. So, for example, you might look at it and it has all the weeds that you're finding have large tap roots, and you might say, okay, well, these species are trying to tell us that we might need a little bit more deeper water penetration or breaking up some of the compaction, etc. Is that how you see different some of the different species as well?
Absolutely. I will walk into a place, into a garden that's full of weeds, and I can tell them what their soil's like
Hmm.
based on looking at the weeds, because they do tell us an enormous amount of what is going on below.
Yeah.
And the more you get to know that, the easier it is to read the environment around you, not just in terms of the soil, but climatic conditions, time of year, all of these sorts of things. And I find often when I'm doing a weed talk, people will say to me, "Oh, I've got so much of such and such." And I'll start talking about that weed and I'll say, my guess would be your garden is blah, blah, blah. And they look at me and go, how did you know that? And it's because of the weeds. It tells me so much about what's happening in your garden.
Hmm.
If any weed can dominate, it means there's a lot going on.
Exactly. And it means
If
that
you've
that's
got a
coming
good
in.
spectrum of weeds, so you've got good diversity, it tells you a lot less about the soil
Yeah.
because you've got lots of different things happening. That's a really good sign. Anytime you have one thing dominating, it's a very clear message.
Yeah, okay, cool. And if there is like all of this diversity, it might just be as simple as nature just bringing in more of this diversity and trying to
And as
diversify that
and
field.
as the diversity builds, so often what happens is you start with one or two, and over time that diversity builds. And
Hmm.
that's where you start seeing, and this is where we start looking at what's called a Cinderella ecosystem,
Yeah.
where you start seeing more and more coming in. The more that comes in, the more diversity of flowers, seeds, forms, it creates more and more habitat. There's more there for the insects, for the birds. You start bringing in all those layers.
Mm,
You're now creating an environment where tree seedlings can germinate. And
yeah,
nature is doing that repair work. And it is that movement towards diversity.
exactly. And it's this progression, right? It's this long-term kind of moving from thing to another, one type of environment. And you might call it like a desert to a rainforest type thing. And a few of the guests, the wonderful people I've had on the show, have shared how there's this movement and natural progression towards something or another, depending on where it goes. How do you view this? And do you think that it is just moving backwards and forwards between the extremes on a scale that we can't even imagine? Hey guys, really quickly, jumping in, I just want to remind you if you are not subscribed to this show, that is the number one thing that you can do to show me your support. So if you're finding value from this conversation and you're deeply engaged, I would love you to hit the follow or subscribe button. All right, back to the show.
No, I don't think it's moving backwards and forwards between extremes. I think it's just, fairly linear. It is
Okay.
nature working towards greater diversity.
Yes.
So it's from that point of view, nature doesn't really, um, in terms of ecosystems, work against diversity. It's always pro-diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that's where I see this as very singular rather than backwards and forwards. It's
Right.
often the starting point is a lot worse than what we realized.
Mm-hmm.
Is a lot more degraded, a lot more damaged. And because of that, it's not as simple as just planting some natives and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
It's because it's no longer a native environment. The
Yeah.
environment has changed so much, the soil's changed, everything about this has changed. It's not as simple as saying, let's put some natives in and walk away.
That's
It's,
very true. My
and this is where the repair job comes in.
So you
That
think that they're repairing an issue in most cases?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's in the vast majority of cases, and I think we are fools if we think they're not.
Yeah.
We're missing a big part of the picture if we don't look at what's happening around us and try and see the job they're doing.
Yeah, and you can see, like you said before, you can see that once you start to notice it, you'll see it on a greater scale. So not just your microclimate of your garden or even the individual microclimates within your garden, but then in your area or in Brisbane in general or
Absolutely.
how
Like in
Queensland's
a
moving.
garden, we want to fast track that process. So we've got
Hmm.
to understand what the weeds are trying to tell us so we can change those conditions. But this gets really juicy. I love this. Is we're finding that yes, they change the soil and they provide habitat. All of these things are things that we've known for a very long time, whether people wanted to accept it or not. This is well known. And one of my favorites is the good old cobbler's pegs. I know this is a little bit wilted, but
Yeah, that's
um,
right.
these flowers are absolutely adored by pollinators.
Hmm.
So this is a very significant weed for pollinators. This is a weed that, as you compost it, improves the soil absolutely off the scale. So we know that this is one that builds a healthier soil. But what we're also finding, and this is a whole new field of science that's really starting to open up, um, is that some of these weeds, including cobbler's pegs, have now been found not only do they improve the soil by the exudates from their roots building extra life in their soil, they've now been found to harbour mycorrhizae that can bond to other plants. And these weeds, as they grow, are directly feeding other plants connected through that mycelial network.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Isn't that a little bit mind-blowing?
That's crazy. I knew that
That weeds can do things like that?
yeah, I knew that there was the brilliant mycorrhizal network and how they, inhabit and surround all the root zones and extend out into the network. But having, I thought that was more a relationship in the soil that it was
It
trading
is in
with
the
the
soil. This is
bacteria
all
and
happening
everything.
in the soil.
I didn't realize though
But
that the weeds though can take probably presumably atmospheric nitrogen, things like this, and send them down through the system,
So all plants will exude some of what they make from photosynthesis into the soil, which feeds the
the
microbes in the
microbes. Yeah.
soil. So that is a really important process that we shut off if we're using too much fertilizer. It's
Hmm.
an important process. I talk about that a lot in my second book, Earth Repair Gardening, because I want people to understand how to protect the soil and the importance of plants. But we can turn any green space, including our gardens, into a carbon sink by turning this mechanism on, getting our plants to pump carbon into the
Hmm.
soil. But yes, we're finding out it's so much more than just pumping organic matter into the soil. It is a two-way street through a mycelial network that's not just exuding into the soil, but it's going directly into that network and into another plant.
Mm.
I'll give you another really amazing example. There was a garden I was working in restoring a long time ago, and underneath all of this wild Guinea grass, it was a flood garden, too much silt. Guinea grass loves that.
Yeah.
Um, I found some heritage roses.
Wow.
There were four different roses. One of these roses had a false mallow at the base of the rose. Now, I knew the false mallow has quite a taproot. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, okay, I'm going to leave it there or prune it off. But, they were neck and neck. I'm going to leave it there. I also knew that it flowers, it brings in pollinators. This is not a bad thing. That rose was 4 times the size of any of the other roses. So
Wow.
I knew that this was working well. And I understood at that point the concept of the mother weed. So I knew that this weed was doing good things. What I didn't know and what sort of came to light years later, when another gardener took over and had a different philosophy and that weed came out, the rose died.
Goodness me.
And that false mallow is one now that the studies are finding is very good at those mycelial networks that bond to other plants and they can do a two-way exchange from one plant to another, completely
Wow.
unrelated plants. So it was a true mother weed.
That's incredible. I've heard say like in the old growth forests when a tree gets felled and it's just a stump and how the mycelial network can keep that stump alive from all of its neighboring relatives. But the cross species thing and
The cross
having
species thing is much, much bigger than we have any idea of.
I bet.
And weeds are now being found to play a significant role. Not all weeds.
Mhm.
Brassicas, for example, they're finding don't do it as much. So there are some that are better than others without question. But isn't this just a little bit mind blowing? How can we hate on a plant with an ability like that?
Well, well, yes, exactly right. And it just seems like every time we think that we have an idea of something or we think we've got it right,
We don't have
we
a
don't.
clue.
We absolutely
All we're
don't.
doing is finding out how much we don't know.
Yeah, and that's it's humbling but somewhat freeing at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, it
Uh,
is.
exactly. Can you tell me then a little bit about a couple of the ones that most people might struggle with? Let's make it just practical for 5 minutes. Um, I'm going to talk about one in particular that I just am curious about myself. I'm trialing a solution of beneficial anaerobic microbes to try and rid the soil of nut grass or the um I
Well,
guess the
let me know
need for
how
nut
that
grass.
goes. It
Yeah,
is
exactly.
because nutgrass is one that I get asked about a lot. And you're right, they are doing a lot of work on specific microbes to attack weeds as well. So
Hmm.
this is a two-way investigation here, which I think is fantastic too. Um, Nutgrass loves a compacted soil. It
Hmm.
loves a compacted soil that is low in calcium.
Hmm.
And you will see your nutgrass go mad after we've had a summer of very heavy rain because that rain is bashing on the soil and adding to compaction
Yeah.
and it's leaching the calcium out of the soil.
Hmm.
So, my first response to that is fix your soil.
Yeah.
If you don't change the soil, you will never break the dominance of the nutgrass. You haven't fixed the problem that the nutgrass is
It's
exploiting.
there to fix. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So, I'd love to know how your experiment goes, but unfortunately for the home gardener, having these sort of beneficial weed destroying microbes is not a solution. It's just not readily available.
Yeah.
What they can do, what is readily available, is add some rock minerals to open the structure of your soil. The
Hmm.
high silica can really open the soil,
Hmm.
add the microbes, add organic mulch. You need to get organic matter into the soil. Now, if your soil's not soft enough that you can stick a fork in and gently lift out a clump of nutgrass, you haven't improved it enough yet.
Hmm.
So, in that case, do nothing but keep improving the soil. If this is your
Right.
lawn, just keep mowing without the catcher.
Yeah.
Every time the nut grass gets taller than the grass and that bothers you, mow without the catcher and you're doing constant composting.
Feeding. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're feeding that
And so
exactly what it
that
needs.
is where you get the benefit of the improved soil. And eventually you can break the dominance of the nut grass because you can dig it out easily.
Hmm.
Then you can put it into weed tea and deal with it that way. But we're looking at that combination, not just of getting rid of the nut grass, but of improving the soil to a point where what you want to grow will grow better.
Yeah. And is there any, I guess, say for example, it was popping up in all your garden beds. Is there something that you could replace it, or sorry, replace its job with another plant? Is there some other things that we can do,
Some
or are we?
deep-rooted plants will
Yes.
will be good because of that soil compaction.
Hmm. And would
And
they crowd it out eventually and crowd out the need for it and do the job and
if you
as long as
grow
we're
things
improving the
taller than
soil?
30 centimeters, if it's in your garden beds, you grow things taller than 30 centimeters, you'll shade it out. So
Yes.
you won't actually kill it, except that, the longer that it can't photosynthesize, the weaker it gets.
Hmm.
But you shade it out, but you can't see it because it's underneath everything else. And if you
Exactly.
can't see it, it's not a problem, is it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really like that because so many people I've seen turn to the chemical sprays, and it's just it frustrates me because I understand where people are coming from, where if they've got this somewhat very unnatural manicured concrete space with some plants in it, you know, they're gonna have problems because it's not a natural space. And I think this might be going back to some of the things you were talking about, this having to share with this lady, about how people are building these spaces and gardens and throwing in just, terrible quality soil in terrible locations and blah blah blah. And they're expecting things to grow and then getting seriously disheartened and losing the passion for getting out in the garden when it
Yep.
does turn to,
Yeah, absolutely.
dead
But so
plants.
there's a number of things that go wrong with this. And, this comes into so much of what I try and teach people is that we go and buy a plant from the garden centre most of the time, and every time I do a talk and I say, who read the label before you bought the plant? You'll get a couple of hands, but most people didn't.
All
And they
right.
take it home. Did you read the label before you planted it? Maybe another hand or two. The majority of people haven't even read the label, let alone gone a little bit further to understanding what conditions that plant needs.
Hmm.
Now, you've taken a plant that's been bred and bred and bred. It's not wild, it's not resilient. It needs certain conditions, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to like being stuck anywhere. And yet they go and put it where they think it's going to look nice, not where it's going to want to grow. And
Mm-hmm.
then they wonder why the weeds are doing better because the weeds could put themselves where they want to be. The plant got stuck where you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
If you put that plant where it was going to do well, gardening is transformed completely. And you reduce the need for any sort of pest control, and all of those problems magically disappear because you've paid attention to the conditions your plant needed in the first place.
That's right. And I often reflect back at people that we know that plants are living things and living beings, but we treat them as if they don't need food, water, and environment and looking after. You go on someone who's going to get a brand new puppy, they're going to be thinking about, okay, what do I need to feed it? How often does it go to the toilet? Blah, blah, blah. And when you get a plant, like, as you say, the majority of us are not even checking the label to see how can I care for this the best way.
I've known people who've spent hundreds of dollars on plants and just stuck them outside and forgot about them and
Yeah.
wondered why it was dead.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And then also the fact that, we're trying to inspire more people to actually get out there and try and grow things. And if you're going out there and just yeah, throwing things out there and hoping for the best, it's really not
It's not
going to
going to
be
work.
yeah, it's not
Yep.
manageable. And that comes down to similar thing where someone might get really excited by the fact that they've got a garden. And I'm so guilty of this because, I will get a space and my creativity will just run wild and I'll go, oh, I can have a bit of all of this. And I have to rein myself in and go, okay, let's start looking at what nature's wants to put here and then try and put some of those plants and
Oh,
slowly
look,
move
we are
it.
all plant lovers.
Yeah.
So that we are all trying to fight the temptation to put in all sorts of things that really shouldn't grow in that spot.
Hmm.
So it is a constant battle with our own passion. I get it.
But you do have to, yeah, you do have to make that sort of realism. And going off what you said before about how all of these plants are in these climate controlled environments and grown specifically for sale at the garden centers, they might even have been traveled from a different part of the country,
Oh,
which
so
is just
many.
is
Yeah.
crazy.
Mhm.
Um, can you talk to the benefits of going and asking someone down the road for a cutting of that
Oh, I
same
love that.
plant rather
It's,
than
yeah. Look, we rely on having a thriving nursery industry. That is really important. I don't want to diss the nursery industry by
yeah.
any means, unless
Hmm.
we're talking about the big box stores. They've got a lot to answer for. But we do need all of this, but really, I do want people to buy local as much as possible.
Hmm.
Just from a sustainability point of view, it's not sustainable to be bringing things any further than we need to, particularly if it's something that grows locally. But more than that, we're bringing plants from a different climate and wondering why they're not growing here.
Yeah.
Whereas if we were to source all our plants as locally as possible, we know they suit our climate.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's huge advantages that way.
And
But
they've
yeah,
been adapted to it, haven't they?
yeah,
Yeah,
most
because
definitely. Even if they're not a native plant, they've been growing here for generations and they're in a climate that suits them.
yeah, and I found that, for example, I did this with a rose actually. I um bought a rose from, it wasn't from any big chain store or anything, but bought a rose, came and put it in the garden, and it really just struggled. It just couldn't stand the heat or anything like this. So it was within 2 weeks, I think. And then I went and got a cutting because I said I was complaining about it, saying, "Oh, I've just got this beautiful rose, bought this one. It looked fantastic, and now it's gone completely downhill." So I said, has anyone got a cutting or something? Has anyone got one? And there was one locally, literally just the other street away from me, who has similar soil, who we have, similar climate and sun exposure for the day. Got a cutting and, nursed it up, and hey presto, beautiful.
So
Just a
your cutting
testament.
grown rose is doing much better.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Hmm.
Leaps and bounds, and because it's
Yep.
it's locally adapted,
That
and
is exactly right. And too often with roses, I mean, roses is a big group and
mhm,
it's one that there's a lot of emotion around.
yes,
And there's not a lot of understanding that, yes, roses do grow in the tropics. You know, the national flower of the Maldives is a rose,
yeah,
but they are different to the roses that grow in temperate climates. So we
exactly.
really need to look at which rose we're growing.
Yeah, well, it was supposed to be a tropical rose anyway. So, but that was years ago. So I'm now, I'm not a rose grower at the moment. But can you tell me about maybe some of the things that we could do at home for ourselves to protect ourselves from a inundation of flood water in the garden? So I'm thinking, are there ways in which we can? I mean, obviously there are certain essential.
Jordan, are you a little bit
Essential.
worried that your property might flood?
I look. I've had some flooding quite a fair bit when it rains a lot, and we get maybe. I mean, this is going to sound not very much compared to some of the things you've seen, but we will get at least a foot or two of water underneath our Queenslander, so
That's a lot. Yeah.
it covers most of our house and most of our property and stuff. So, luckily the house is okay. But what it does is it brings a lot of contaminated mud and water and just rubbish from around suburbia through the gardens and things like this. But I was hoping that some of the plants and things that I have in my garden can drink some of this or allow some of that to soak through a little bit
There
first.
are some certain strategies, and I do include these in gardening after a flood.
Yes.
Um, there are definitely strategies there that will help. I would start with earth repair gardening, though, and look at the way water is moving through your property
Right. Yes. Yeah.
because you've got to deal with the overland flow, which
Hmm.
is a little bit, I mean, it contributes to the flooding, but it is a different way of dealing with water.
Hmm.
That what we see a lot of happening now is that the town planning is all for getting rid of excess water. And therefore, we're creating situations where we've got bigger houses, smaller properties, there's no infiltration spaces. So we're getting these larger volumes of stormwater that then move very quickly. Stormwater systems aren't big enough for, escalation of problems. So, but we can have drought and flood at the same time
Hmm.
because that water can't penetrate.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So we've got to create a situation in our gardens where one, the water can penetrate, and plant choices and our soil improvement are critical for that.
Hmm.
But two, we've also got to look at water management so that we can put in drainage systems, for example, that trap water and
Hmm.
only let excess water escape.
Yes.
And this is a concept too that is not being talked about enough. Everything is about getting rid of all water. We're
Hmm.
going to go back into drought. That is a given. I hope that's a long way ahead. I don't want to have to deal with it, but it is a given. That is the nature of living in Australia.
Yes.
And when that time comes, we're all going to be very sorry when we see every drop of rain out in the gutter instead of soaking into our gardens.
Yeah.
So we need to instead plan for that at the same time as we plan for flooding.
Hmm.
That's
Right.
really, really important. So you would need to set up some drains around your place that will get rid of excess water, but
Hmm.
allow water to soak in before it becomes excess water.
Yeah.
Certain plantings definitely help. You need trees, you need the deep roots. They cycle water through a system. You
Yeah.
need things like lamandras to create that little bit of a wall that holds the soil together and
Yes.
slows water flows down because you
Mm.
don't want the scouring.
Yeah.
So there's a number of different ways of using that water. And then you want to channel that excess water towards a spot where you're okay with the water being there.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
down in that point, that's where you plant your bananas.
Yeah.
Things like that. You work with it as much as possible.
Mm. And you're using some of these, I guess, permaculture techniques and things like this, where we're looking at the land and the flow of the water and trying to slow it down, allow it to catch in different areas. And you can also, I've seen some really creative ways of channeling off into little pools where they kind of sit on the hills or swales and things like this. And I've tried to, because I've now transformed part of the front lawn here in the garden to a garden, and to show people how to turn it from a lawn into a productive, healthy soiled space, and hopefully very diverse as well. Yeah, and doing this online and doing it publicly, I want to try and show as much of the ups and downs of this whole process, because it's not going to be simple. I don't have all the answers, and I'm trying my best to observe what we've got, prepare for events like this, and balance what I also want in this space as well. So
Yeah, but there are some strategies there that make it a lot easier than other ways.
true, exactly right.
And some of those keys are looking at how the water flows and how it moves and how to work with that. If it's on a slope, you need to do trenching.
Hmm.
We need to get the water to drop in. There's little things like that, which is similar to your swale system,
Yeah.
except that it can potentially handle larger volumes. So that's all we're looking at. That's why there's a whole chapter on that in earth repair gardening, because it's critical whether you're growing food or anything else. And you have to do that in conjunction with soil improvement and growing things with deep roots.
Mm, that's
And
so true.
that works together. And this is where my approach to gardening is a little bit different to most people, because I come at it from an ecologist point of view, is that it's everything together. It's never just this or that. It's different things together. And if you look at anything in isolation, you're limiting how well it's going to work.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I really love that approach because it brings together so many different facets that we're not often seeing put together, or things that were thought about together. And you're right, everything impacts everything in a way that probably more so we don't understand.
Yeah, and this is what permaculture is about. But permaculture is just focused on food. But if
Mm,
you take those principles and you extrapolate it out to any garden, you start seeing that you've got to build systems and connections. Otherwise, everything is working in isolation and everything is limited in its success.
yeah, that's very true. Well, I really want to encourage everybody to check out your books, because there's plenty more of these answers that you've gone through with us in these
So much
books.
more.
And I know that they're an absolute wealth of knowledge. Can I talk to you just briefly here at the end about writing books
Hmm.
and the process of that for you? Did you ever perceive yourself as a writer? Did you ever want to write books? And then how has that experience been for you from start to finish?
Um, an interesting one. I remember being at a party and saying to a friend, "Oh, I might write gardening books." And, just having this spark of an idea and then thinking, oh, later, "Oh, clearly you'd been drinking too much. Why do you think you were going to do that?" And then as I got on my weed journey, realized there's a lot that needs to be communicated here. I need to put this information together to communicate it. And that
Yeah.
sort of led me into writing a book. Um, So for me, it's everything that I've written in a book is not just nice. It actually has a level of this is important information that I really think is going to help people, but the earth as a whole needs people
Mm,
to start getting this. So that's kind of where I've come from, that if I don't have some mission, I'm not going to sit down and write a book because there's other
y-
things I could be doing that's a lot
yeah,
more fun. But it's
yeah.
it's being driven and going down a rabbit hole of exploring a topic in so much detail. I end up doing such a huge amount of research
Mm,
that which I absolutely love. That's
yeah.
that scientist in me that's just got to get into the nuts and bolts of it all. But it's for me, it is very much about there's important information to share, but it's not just taking important information, saying, here's the information. I feel it's really important to make it digestible
Hmm.
and appropriate for anybody to pick up and use in their garden.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
don't have a science degree like I do. That doesn't mean this information isn't relevant to you and shouldn't be presented to you in a way that is very usable for you.
Yeah, exactly right. I I would imagine that it would be difficult, especially when you're passionate and you are always researching as well as a scientist, like you said. You're finding out new things all the time. Is it hard to put a bookend on the book and wrap it and package it?
Totally. Absolutely, it is. It is. I get to a point where I just go, stop. That's it.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would never finish it.
I
Yeah.
can relate to that. I used to write music. I still write a bit, but I used to write it quite a lot. And just just saying stop or setting yourself a bit of a deadline to kind of go, look, okay, you need to just put it down and
Yeah.
whatever we can do round two later on or whatever, or move it into something else. But I imagine that's quite difficult with all sort of creative arts.
Yes, of course it is. And you're putting your heart and soul. It is difficult. Yes.
Yeah, very,
Yeah,
very
it
cool.
is.
Well, what I would like to do just at the end here is for you to let everybody know where the best place is to go and find you. I know your website has an absolute wealth of knowledge, but can you just run through a couple of the things that you have on offer and where people might find you?
Yes, certainly. It's well, if you want to know more about weeds, I do have a free library talk coming up at Browns Plains Library on
Wonderful.
Saturday.
Oh,
This
cool.
coming Saturday. So and you can bring a weed along to that. I do have also a weed workshop at the Beelarong Community Farm coming up in
Wonderful.
September. Again, you can book into that one and bring your weeds along so I can talk directly to the weeds that you have and are trying to deal with. That's another one that's a bit longer, that's a lot more involved, that as a workshop, but it's going to be really getting in there with those weeds. So
Yeah,
bring
wonderful.
what you've got so you really learn about that. But there's always things going on. I think I've got another talk coming up in September at the Hyperdome Library on easy organic lawn care.
Cool.
It's that's really important as well. I think lawns are a space we forget that
Mm-hmm.
need to be sustainable and organic, and they can be.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
It's so trying to teach that one as well. But I have for those people who can't get to any of these talks, there are the books.
Yeah.
You can find the books through my website. There are the online courses. There's a whole range of online courses there that walk people through this process. So it can hold your hand through learning some of these different things and how to apply it to your garden. Because my mission, I'm a gardening coach. So it's not just about me coming in telling you what to do to make your garden better. I want to do it in a way that makes you a better gardener.
Yeah.
So that
Mm.
whatever I teach you once, you can apply and use that over and over. That's what I want to do with my courses, and this is where I go to with my coaching packages. This is not about you just do what you're told. This is about understanding the reasons why things work in the garden and why they don't work. So for you, gardening becomes easy.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to that conversation. Quickly before you go, and do not shut off the episode just yet, I wanted to make sure that you go and check out those links that Kate suggested at the end there, because on her website, there is so many things that you can find value in. And as she said, there's this flood or gardening for a flood book, and it's free. It's a free ebook. So go and check it out. Go and actually grab that Gardening After a Flood, and you can get yourself some of the very vital knowledge, especially if you're living in an area like this in Australia where we face these types of floods. But I'm so grateful to Kate for her time. So thank you to her. And please go and say if you enjoyed the episode to her. That would be wonderful. Remember, as always, a review is so greatly appreciated. Just jump on and do it now. It's the end of the episode. You can just go and quickly click a review, type in a few thoughtful words, or leave us some stars, and that'll help us spread the episode to more people. That's it. That's it from me. Thank you again for listening and watching, and I'm very excited. We're going to be back again next week with another epic episode, so we'll see you then. Take care, and bye for now.